Welcome. As you settle in, take a deep breath and let the pace of the modern world slip away. Tonight, we journey to the harsh, windswept landscapes of the Viking Age, where the world was stark, unforgiving, and driven by the rhythms of survival. Imagine yourself in a small Viking village, nestled between rolling hills and vast, frozen plains. The winter is long, the sunlight scarce, and the struggle to live another day is constant. Picture yourself as a Viking farmer. What was life like in such a remote and challenging environment? Let us step into the thick of this demanding existence. The day begins before the sun rises, but in the dead of winter, it's hard to know where the dark sky ends and the pale snow-covered ground begins. The cold seeps into your bones as you step outside the small, long house that is your home. The air is thick with the scent of wood smoke from the hearth inside, where your family sleeps, wrapped in thick animal pelts to keep the frost at bay. You make your way to the fields, though they're not much to look at. The ground is frozen solid, making it difficult to plant or harvest. But the soil, though rich during the short summers, has long since hardened under the weight of snow and ice. Farming in the Viking Age wasn't just hard work, it was a battle against the elements. Even when summer arrived, it was brief, offering only a few weeks to cultivate the crops that would feed your family through the winter. The work is relentless. Every day there's something that needs doing. Chopping firewood, repairing fences, tending to the animals, sheep, goats, and perhaps a few cattle. The stables are always cold, the smell of hay and manure mixing with the ever-present scent of wood and earth. You feel the weight of your labor constantly, your hands rough and calloused from gripping the tools needed to survive. Winter means long hours spent indoors, where the hearth burns but never quite brings warmth. The village is small, and the walls of the longhouse are thick with the scent of wood smoke, cooking meat, and the sweat of the people living inside. The windows are tiny slits, allowing only faint glimmers of daylight to filter through. The days are short, and the nights stretch endlessly, leaving you with little to do but sit by the fire, your breath visible in the frigid air, waiting for the sun to rise again. Inside the longhouse, the floor is dirt, churned into mud from the wet feet of those who've spent the day outside. Straw is scattered in places, but it offers little comfort against the cold earth. You sit close to the fire, your body tired from another day of hard labor. The scent of the food wafting from the pot and mingling with the persistent odor of wet animal skins and earth. Every day is the same, a cycle of labor, cold, and the struggle for warmth. The winter is not only physically exhausting, but also mentally taxing. With the scarcity of sunlight, it feels like time moves more slowly, and every day is just a repetition of the last. There's little reprieve. The cold and darkness affect the villagers' spirits as they wait for the arrival of spring, knowing full well that even then they will only have a short window to produce enough food for the coming months. It's a life of constant struggle, fight for survival, season after season. When spring does finally come, it's fleeting. The thawing of the ground means long hours in the field, planting barley, oats, and rye. But even this brings its own set of challenges. The soil is heavy and wet, and the work doesn't let up. There's always something that needs tending, something that can go wrong, an animal that gets sick, a crop that fails, or a barn that needs repair. Imagine this relentless cycle: hard work, exhaustion, and the constant presence of the cold. The brutality of living as a Viking farmer, ISNT. Just in the chores, you must do it, in the constant reminder that the land, the weather, and nature itself are indifferent to your struggles. Success is fleeting, and failure is always just around the corner. As we step away from the farm's harsh conditions, imagine now the sudden transition to the turbulent world of Viking leadership. What happens when the world of myth and legend collides with the stark realities of death? Let us explore the death of the legendary Ragnar Lothbrok and the blurred lines between truth and folklore. Now, let us leave behind the harsh realities of farm life in the Viking Age and shift our focus to a figure whose name resonates across centuries: Ragnar Lothbrok, a hero of Viking sagas, a king, a warrior, and a symbol of Norse might. Ragnar's death stands at the crossroads of history and myth. But how much of the story surrounding his demise is fact, and how much is fantasy? As we venture into this legendary tale, imagine yourself standing on the windswept shores of a Viking stronghold, witnessing the final moments of a man whose death would echo through history and change the fate of a kingdom. Ragnar Lodbrok's death is one of the most dramatic moments in Viking lore, filled with the clash of myth and reality. The sagas tell us that Ragnar was captured by King Gley of Northumbria, a fate that seemed almost inevitable for a man who had made so many enemies in his raids across Europe. But how much of this is rooted in historical fact? And how much has been embellished by the poets and storytellers who came after? Ragnar's capture is almost cinematic in its presentation. According to legend, after years of raids, conquests, and triumphs, Ragnar was eventually ensnared in a trap by Glar, who, perhaps seeking revenge for the Viking raids that had ravaged his kingdom, seized the great warrior. Imagine the sight: Ragnar, the mighty Viking king, bound and led into captivity. His once fierce eyes now filled with the grim realization that his end was near. But it was Ragnar's death that would define his legacy. The sagas recount that King Glar, in an act of brutal vengeance, threw Ragnar into a pit of snakes, a cruel and unusual punishment meant to break the spirit of even the mightiest man. As Ragnar descended into the pit, he was surrounded by writhing serpents, their venomous bites lashing at his skin. But instead of pleading for mercy or crying out in fear, Ragnar is said to have laughed, calling out in his final moments how the little pigs will grunt when they hear how the old boar suffered. This defiant death, filled with both physical agony and indomitable spirit, became the stuff of legend. His last words, which supposedly foretold the vengeance that would be exacted on Glar, would spark the retaliation of Ragnar's sons. Most famously, the bloody revenge of Ivar the Boneless, who would lead an army to avenge his father's death and eventually kill Glar in a manner that mirrored the gruesome fate Ragnar had suffered. But the real question we must ask ourselves is, how much of this truly happened? Did Ragnar really die at the hands of snakes in a pit? Was his final moment filled with laughter and defiance? Or is it a story crafted over time through generations of storytelling to ensure that Ragnar's legacy would endure in the minds of future generations? What we do know is that Ragnar Lothbrok was likely a real figure, though the precise details of his life and death are obscured by time. He may have been a king, or perhaps more of a legendary chieftain. He may have met his end in Northumbria, but the dramatic, snake-filled demise may have been a later addition to the sagas, crafted to enhance his mythic status. In the Viking Age, the line between truth and legend was often blurred. Kings and warriors were made larger than life through the telling of sagas, their deeds exaggerated and their deaths transformed into stories of heroic endurance. Ragnar's death, as recounted in the sagas, was a powerful story of vengeance, courage, and the relentless spirit of the Viking warrior. It was a death that would echo in the minds of his people and inspire future generations to come. Even if the details of Ragnar's death were not as sensational as the sagas suggest, his impact on Viking culture was undeniable. His legacy lives on through the actions of his sons and the stories that would be passed down through generations. Whether he died in a pit of snakes or in battle on foreign shores, Ragnar Lothbrok became an enduring symbol of the Viking way of life bold, unyielding and always ready for vengeance. With Ragnar's story and death still lingering in the air, we now turn our attention to the Viking's views on death itself, the rituals and beliefs that shaped their understanding of the afterlife. One of the most fascinating aspects of Viking culture was the practice of ship burials, an act that reflected their complex beliefs about death, the afterlife, and the journey to Valhalla. Having ventured through the legendary death of Ragnar Lothbrok, we now shift our focus to the Vikings' most sacred rituals surrounding death, the ship burial. This sacred rite was not only a final passage for the dead, but a powerful statement of Viking beliefs, the journey to the afterlife, and their desire to honor their fallen leaders in the most grandiose way possible. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of a Viking shore, the soft crash of waves against the rocks, the scent of salt water in the air, and a long ship ready to sail one final time. This is the world of Viking death rituals. In the Viking world, death was not the end, but rather a transitional journey to another realm, where the brave, put, and honored would sail to Valhalla, the great hall of the slain, to feast with the gods. To the Vikings, the ship was more than a means of travel. It was a symbol of power, strength, and the journey beyond life. A ship burial, therefore, was the most profound and ceremonial way to honor a fallen warrior, king, or noble. Imagine standing on the shores of a Viking settlement, watching as the body of a revered chieftain is carefully placed aboard a longship. The ship, crafted from sturdy oak, is adorned with intricate carvings and shields, each one a tribute to the deceased's status and accomplishments. The body, wrapped in furs and clothed in armor, is laid in the boat, surrounded by weapons, treasures, and perhaps a few loyal servants or companions who would accompany the deceased in the afterlife. This ship would be pushed out into the water, its prow slicing through the waves as it carries the fallen warrior toward the realm of the gods. The boat, filled with its cargo of death, would then be set ablaze in a brilliant conflagration. The flames would consume the ship, sending the spirit of the deceased on its final journey to Valhalla, where they would join Odin and the other slain warriors in eternal battle and feastings. The Viking ship burial was not just about the afterlife, however. It was a statement of the deceased's importance in life. By being placed aboard a ship and sent out to sea, the Viking believed they were joining the gods in the greatest of all honors. The ship itself was a vehicle not only for the journey to Valhalla, but also for the continuation of the deceased's legacy. The practice of ship burial was a grand spectacle, often accompanied by feasting, music, and a show of strength. The Vikings did not shy away from making death a communal event. It was a time for the living to celebrate the life of the deceased, and to demonstrate their power and honor as they sent their loved ones off to the gods. But ship burials were not the only way the Vikings honored the dead. In addition to ship burials, the Vikings practiced cremation, burial mounds, and other rituals that varied depending on the person's social status, family traditions, and regional customs. What remained consistent, however, was the belief in the journey beyond death and the honor bestowed upon those who had lived a life of valor and strength. The Viking belief in the afterlife, especially their notion of Valhalla, was deeply intertwined with their warrior culture. The idea of dying in battle and being honored in the halls of the gods was the ultimate aspiration for a Viking warrior. It wasn't just about survival or wealth, it was about living and dying with honor. The Viking warrior believed that only through courage in battle could they earn their place in Valhalla. A peaceful death was not one to be desired, was the fight, the struggle, and the glory that defined a life worth living. As we reflect on the grandeur of the Viking ship burials and the belief systems that guided these practices, it's clear that death was not seen as a final end, but as a transformative journey. The journey to Valhalla was as important as the journey through life itself, and the Vikings went to great lengths to ensure that their loved ones were sent off properly. With death and belief intertwining in the Viking world, we now turn our attention to a very different aspect of Viking culture: the feasts of a Jarl. These grand banquets were not only occasions for food and drink, but also political gatherings, where power was negotiated and alliances were forged. Imagine stepping into the great hall of a Viking Jarl, the air thick with the sounds of feasting, the smell of roasting meat, and the weight of impending political upheaval. Having explored the sacred rituals surrounding Viking death, we now move from the reverence for the deceased to the exhilarating and often treacherous world of Viking feasts. In the halls of a Jarlawan, of the highest-ranking Viking nobles, the atmosphere is charged with power, intrigue, and the delicate balance of politics. The feast is more than a celebration. It's a stage for political maneuvering, a place where alliances are forged, and where one's fate can be decided over a cup of mead. Picture yourself entering this grand hall, the air heavy with the scent of roasted meat, the sound of laughter mingling with hushed whispers of secret deals. Welcome to the Viking banqueter place, where both feasts and power shifts happen in the blink of an eye. The Grand Hall of the Jarl is a place where the elite of Viking society gather to indulge in the bounty of the land and the spoils of battle. The long wooden table stretches out before you, laden with roasted boar, smoked fish, hearty bread, and freshly brewed mead. The room is alive with the clatter of tankards, the laughter of warriors, and the soft murmurs of political negotiations happening just beneath the surface. As you stand there, the sight of finely adorned Viking warriors and noblemen fills the space. Each man and woman dressed in furs, tunics, and jewelry that signal their rank and wealth. At the center of this room stands the Jarl, a man whose power is not just based on his wealth or military might, but also on his ability to navigate the complex web of relationships that holds Viking society together. You notice how everyone in the room, even those who appear to be in the throes of merriment, is constantly aware of the delicate balance of power. The feast is an opportunity to demonstrate strength, to impress allies, and to subtly outmaneuver rivals. As you move through the feast, you can't help but feel the undercurrent of tension. While the Jarl may appear generous and jovial, offering his guests generous portions of meat and gallons of meat, there is always the knowledge that in such a gathering, nothing is truly as it seems. Beneath the hearty toasts and hearty laughter lies a calculated effort to secure power and influence. Every word spoken, every glance exchanged, has meaning. The Jarl's closest men, his trusted advisors and warriors, are engaged in quiet conversations at the edges of the hall, their eyes scanning the room for threats, opportunities, and shifting loyalties. The Jarl himself is not just a figure of authority, but a master of politics. He knows that power is fleeting, and that no victory is permanent unless alliances are secured. He must keep his supporters close, and his enemies even closer. As you sit at the table, you notice the subtle game at play. Some men, though laughing and drinking, are constantly seeking to gain favor with the Jarl. Others, with their quiet, steely eyes, are calculating how best to undermine those around them. The feast continues late into the night. The fire crackles in the hearth, casting flickering shadows across the room. The mead flows freely, and the atmosphere becomes more relaxed. The noise rising as the warriors tell stories of past battles, their voices growing louder with each drink. But behind the raucous laughter, you sense the strain. The Jarl's Hall is a place where power is in constant flux, where feasts and alliances are often followed by betrayal and conflict. As the night wears on, it's clear that this is a world where loyalty is tested by every action, every word. The feast, for all its merriment, is a time of reflection on power, how it is maintained, how it is lost, and how it can shift in an instant. The next day, when the feast is over, the real political maneuvering begins. with the Jarl's rivals and allies no longer hidden behind the laughter and toasts. The work of securing dominance, or resisting it, will be done with sharpened words and cold strategy. The feast ends with the departure of guests into the cold night. But the reverberations of what happened during the evening linger. The Jarl, the warriors, the chieftains, they will all carry the weight of the feast with them. The next day will bring new deals, new threats, and new power plays. But for now, the echoes of the feast continue to shape the path ahead. As the feast winds down and the fires in the hall slowly burn out, we leave the world of Viking feasts, power struggles, and political maneuvering behind. Throughout tonight's journey, we've witnessed the harshness of Viking farming life, the tragic death of Ragnar Lothbrok, the sacred rituals of ship burials, and the complex power dynamics at the Jarl's feasts. From the cold fields of the north to the roaring fires of Viking halls, the Viking world was one of constant struggle, honor, and intrigue. Take a moment to reflect on the lives of these people who, despite their battles and hardships, left behind a legacy that continues to captivate the imagination today. As you settle in, may the whispers of the Viking past help guide you into a peaceful and restful night. Good night.